Good day everyone, welcome to another experience and impressions video. Today's topic, Final Fantasy III. More specifically, the Steam version. Although the game is a bit older, it's still fun. The absolute high point for me has been the superb job system. Let's delve into giving some context to the game. Final Fantasy III, developed and published by Square, initially released in 1990 on the Famicom in Japan only. Only the Nintendo DS remake, developed by Matrix Software, released internationally. This occurred in 2006 and it was the last Final Fantasy game to hit the international stage. This is the version that also made it over to Steam in an altered form in 2014, and which is the version I played. The game also received ports to Android or iOS. Like the good old days of Final Fantasy I, this game has a world map where you do the exploration and encounter instances like towns or caves. In towns, you do the story progression, talk to villagers to get interesting information, or do the shopping to prepare for future adventures. In the monster-infested instances and the overworld, there can be random encounters, which brings us to the combat system. Combat is turn-based, but I found it very hard to determine which character goes first, so cleverly timing heals was not a thing, and sometimes it was just a case of praying that the enemy does not go first. However, the combat is quite decent. Each of the four protagonists gets to attack with their weapons, do a job-related activity like casting magic in the case of mages, stealing items with a thief, or doing a counter-strike in the case of the monk, and so on and so forth. You can also use items from your inventory. Besides the obvious items like potions and status ailment healing, there are also other usable items. For example, some rods used that way cast free magic, saving a lot of MP for the mages. The main points of progression are the equipment, character level and job system with job levels. Character level does about what you would expect. With higher character level, the stats of a character increase, making them more effective. Leveling is done through gaining XP, which you get from defeating enemies. This means difficulty is adjustable by means of grinding a few levels if things get too hard. Equipment and items are mostly obtained from loot chests in dungeons and shops in towns. Each shop does have a mastery item though, which can only be obtained from a mastersmith upon reaching job level 99. But the gem in the progression system is the job system. Each of the four protagonists does start as freelancer, but soon there is the possibility to select and change jobs at will. The only penalty for doing so is a slight reduction in stats for a few battles. Stats are determined by the selected job, which means a long-time mage changing into a fighter type job is just as good as a long-time fighter type character, assuming the same job level and character level. The only caveat here is the HP pool, which carries over from job to job and requires some care if you want to reach the max HP of 9999. For casual play this can be ignored though. Thanks to this swapping system, it is very much encouraged to try new jobs and experiment with the party composition. This is the reason why I was probably a bit over-leveled throughout the game, because I swapped around jobs a bit and then regrinded a few job levels. Talking of job levels, each character has a job level which determines how effective the character is at the job. From my experience, this influences the amount of hits and critical chance, as well as job action effectiveness. The thief has a better chance to steal stuff at high job levels, for example. There are a total of 23 jobs in the game, that's quite a lot. They unlock in 4 batches and 1 from a side quest, so there is a ton of possibility for the team composition. Each job has different equipment and magic is also learned from items, which are bought in stores. So having a varied cast of characters and jobs is probably better, since you can use the highest level heavy armor as well as mage armor you just found. Another thing that perhaps can be put in the progression section is the ship progression. The game has multiple different forms of ships and airships available to get around, so the game opens up based on which ship forms are available at the moment. As for the story in my opinion is somewhat middling and isn't too memorable. The cool things are how the world opens up through acquisition of ships, as I already just talked about. So if you lose a ship for story reasons, you are naturally constrained to walking and thus not exploring regions you shouldn't be in because of a too low level. The accessible world is vast, however a lot of the big map is ocean and not particularly interesting. Putting a few caves and islands in for exploration would have helped making the world more interesting. As it is, almost each cave and dungeon, perhaps 2 exceptions, is required to be visited at some point throughout the story. I'm usually not bothered by having a linear story and not many exploration things around, as long as the world does not feel like a vast emptiness. But back to the positive points of the story. A few times you get a follower in the story, which can be seen as an automated 5th character. The followers will not take damage, but will help from time to time by casting some magic or attacking. I abused these characters during the duration where I had to escort them a bit, to do some extra grinding, since another helping hand helps just a tiny bit. Although the story per se was not my favorite, I did appreciate that the length was just right. I never felt like things are just dragged out for the sake of making the game longer. Concerning the presentation of the game, we need to keep in mind that I played the Steam version, which is a port of the Nintendo DS version. The graphics are accordingly simple and not pushing graphics forward, but for an NDS game I think it's good and does the job. I especially liked the rendered intro cinematic. The music is good, especially the different ship themes. The sad thing is the battle music. It's the same battle music each and every battle. An option to just continue playing the overworld music would have been appreciated. As far as performance goes, there are 2 points I noticed. For one, the sound system of the game has had issues with my surround sound system and did not play music or sounds half of the time. After I switched over to my stereo headphones, these issues were resolved. The second point is the game performance in the battles, namely the animations. After you select the commands, it felt very sluggish and could have been increased in speed. I know that would have worked since, as we'll see later, there is an auto battle mode and there it is sped up. So the performance would have been there, it's just some time multiplier that would have had to be tweaked. And that brings me to the interesting points that didn't fit into any other point. We start off with the aforementioned auto battle mode. This is a mode where the animation section of a battle is sped up and the characters simply repeat the last order given to them. This is the ultimate tool for grinding, since you can easily watch some YouTube or do something else on the side, while occasionally walking a few steps in the game for the next encounter. In terms of equipable items, many of them also grant a stat boost, but this is usually not visible apart from memorizing the character stats before equipping, then rechecking after equipping. This UI could have been improved to directly show the stat changes. What irked me somewhat is the fact that you can only perform a full save on the overworld. If you are in a dungeon or cave, there's only an option to quick save if you have to shut the game down quickly. The quick save quits the game and can only be resumed exactly once, so you have no way of saving before a boss fight, for example, to see what the boss is weak to or if you have to adjust the party composition in some way or grind a few levels. So if you were ill-equipped, you would have to do the entire instance again and not just the section before the boss. There are a few hidden items and switches in the game, and they can be found by zooming in with the camera. I would have liked another indication that told me if I had everything in the current map a tad more, but having the ability to find hidden items without consulting a guide is decently close to a completion indicator. Luckily, in the Steam version they did away with the NDS letter sending and friend system. For some side quests, you do have to receive letters from NPCs with the various protagonists. In the Nintendo DS version, you had to first send letters to friends before the NPCs even started sending you letters. Thank the crystals they changed this in the Steam version. It's almost like all these pointless social interaction systems Nintendo puts into their single-player games. Like the letter flasks in the Wind Waker HD, or the stamps in the Twilight Princess HD. If you like them, hey, good for you. But I personally just think development resources could have been spent on more tangible features. Anyways, let's stop that particular rant. All in all, the game really is a gem, and that's all thanks to its job system. I like that system so much that I hope they kept it for Final Fantasy IV, which would be the next single-player Final Fantasy game for me to play. That was my video on Final Fantasy III. I hope you enjoyed. As usual, let me know your experience with the game or ideas for improvements. Also, like and subscribe if you are feeling generous. Thank you very much for watching, and see you on the next video.